Okay, so first topic in our next unit, Earth Science. Before we get to the whole climate change stuff, though, we have to have background information. I want you guys to walk away from here as informed scientists, okay? Not people who have just an opinion, like we have in social studies class, but I want you to hopefully have a scientific background. And in order to do that, we have to have some vocabulary. So today, we're going to begin by just learning some basic vocabulary that has to do with Earth science, okay? Some students find it useful to maybe make a definitions list. You'll notice I have a lot of bolded terms on here. This is a very different type of science than chemistry. Chemistry is much more of a do something sort of science, where you have to like write something down, you have to make a formula, you have to balance it. There's not a lot we're going to actually, finger quotes here, we're not going to do a whole lot. I know that maybe sounds kind of weird. We're going to talk about a lot of things, we're going to think about it, but there's no application where you have to like write a formula, where you have to solve an equation. Does that make sense? Okay, so different type of unit here. Let's start. We got to talk about our Earth, right? And our goal for Earth science is to be able to use good vocabulary to describe what do we see around us, okay? In grade 9, you're supposed to do a unit where you talk about ecosystems. And maybe you learned about things like habitats, communities, populations. Maybe those are some words that you're familiar with. That's what we're building on today. And so this is what I want to start with. We want to talk about our system. There are so many different ways that we can categorize our system, but for the most part, what we want to talk about is Earth. For right now, this is the only planet we can live on. It's what we've got. So the system we're discussing is Earth, and we've discovered that there's really three main things that our Earth is made out of. We can really categorize it by either water, land, or air. Right? Those are your three main places you can exist, right? You can either be an animal that lives on land. You can be an animal that lives in the water, fish, turtles, dolphins, stuff like that. You could be a bird, right? And all of those things I just described, they are all things that life, living things, can be in, right? And so we have a name for that. We call it the biosphere. Right? You guys know the word bio? Not just like bio as in biology, but like the root of the word bio means living. Living is bio, and sphere, globe. So when we talk about the biosphere, we're talking about all the things that are living on Earth. Okay? So like I mentioned here, there are really those three components of the biosphere. But I said water, land, and air. We actually have different terminology that we use than just water, land, and air. And you can see some of them written on this slide right here. Air, in terms of the physics word, is called atmosphere. You've probably heard that one before, atmosphere. Lithosphere down here is the word we give for anything that is things that live on land or under the ground, like worms and things that burrow. And then finally, the hydrosphere, if you can see that right here. The hydrosphere is the official word we give for anything that happens to be water-based. Okay, first thing we should talk about. Do you have to be in one or the other? Or can things transfer between them? Yeah, totally, right? Like a frog, as an example, can live in the hydrosphere and the lithosphere. Right? There are some things that live in water and on land, right? And to be honest, we as humans kind of live on the lithosphere and the atmosphere. Because we need the atmosphere because it gives us the oxygen we need to breathe, but we don't live purely, up in the clouds, although I guess in theory maybe we could, right? But we need the lithosphere because we walk on the ground. And to be honest, we kind of need the hydrosphere too because we need water for everyday life activities. I don't think we can really separate these three. Right? They all kind of come together. Okay. So I've got some notes that are just kind of on each of these things one at a time. Here's the first one, the lithosphere. This is your rock, your soil, your earth, so to speak. Okay. It provides, as you can read here, all the water and minerals needed. And we're really going to want to talk about plants on the lithosphere because plants are ultimately your food. Right? At the ultimate source of energy, what do we eat? I mean, if it's not like horribly processed, well, we're probably eating plants. And if we're not eating plants, we're eating an animal that ate plants. Does that make sense? Like if you're enjoying a nice yummy steak, well, guess what that cow was eating at one point? A plant, right? Yeah, a grass. Okay. Now, I'm not going to expect you guys to memorize anything, by the way. So please don't look at all this vocabulary and go, oh my goodness, I need to memorize all these words. But like, this would be a good example of a cross-section of what our Earth is made of. There's actually like different layers to the lithosphere there is the mantle and the core, there is a crust as well. And these are kind of like the main three parts of the Earth. The crust is kind of the most topmost section, along with the mantle, which is kind of right underneath it, and then the core is like the center of the Earth. We're really not focusing on that. We just want to make sure you kind of know the vocabulary. Okay, so don't stress about like memorizing that, because we're not going to. I put this chart in here just so you can see just how big the lithosphere is, though. We're talking 5,000–6,000 kilometers from there to the center of the Earth. And then that's just the center of the Earth, right? If this is us in North America, it's 5,000 kilometers just to the center of the Earth, 5,000 more kilometers to get down to, I don't know, Australia on the other side of the world. So, okay, second sphere we want to talk about, the hydrosphere. So hydrosphere basically involves anything involving water. And here's where the overlap comes in then. We're not just talking water that's like ocean water. We're talking water that's in the ground. We're talking water that's in the air. For example, if there's a cloud that's about to rain, that's water. That's part of the hydrosphere, right? So you can have the hydrosphere in the atmosphere. You can have water that's underground. That's water in the lithosphere. So here's some more words and vocabulary hopefully you're familiar with. Things like evaporation and condensation. We just finished talking chemistry. Evaporation is a physical change of water when it goes from a liquid to a gas. Liquid to gas is when you evaporate something. When you condense something, it's where you go from a gas back to a liquid. And water is constantly changing its format. Sometimes water even hits that solid format like we had this morning if you had frost on your windshield. It took me an extra 5 minutes to get here. Right? And that's what this line right here says. Water's constantly cycling in and out of the atmosphere. Clouds are water droplets. Here's another bolded word. Again, don't worry about memorizing it. You can always look this up in my class. The cryosphere is anything that's frozen. So that could be glaciers, permafrost, snow, ice caps. Anything that's frozen is the cryosphere. And I like this word right here. Temporarily frozen. Does anything have to remain permanently frozen? I mean, all we need to do is just get it above 0 degrees Celsius and it's no longer permanently frozen. There's not a lot of places on Earth that permanently remain frozen, right? Like much of our snow and ice and stuff like that, it will recede. There are some areas like the polar ice caps and the top of the Himalayas where, yeah, there's snow there year round. But any of you guys ever gone to Waterton? Right? Like you've seen in Waterton that there's still snow in like, say, June, July. But is it like the same snow year-round? I'm fairly certain that some of those molecules must have evaporated and new ones have now returned into solid. So anyways, I just want to point out that the cryosphere is all the temporarily frozen stuff. Things that have the ability to grow and recede, go in and out. That polar bear I talked about earlier, we kind of expect that some areas of the Arctic lose their snow. That is actually somewhat normal. To what degree is it normal? Okay, that's a different question. All right, anyways, moving on. I need you guys to be aware of the concept of what's called the hydrological cycle. And I've got a huge slide of words on here. Hopefully you've noticed by now, I don't like to be a teacher who stands at the front and does this. Okay, class, the hydrological cycle gives off energy. I'm not going to do that. What I'm going to do instead is, rather than read all of this, can we just look at a picture? This is the hydrological cycle. I'm sure you know about it. You must have. It's where water moves around. You can play, just make sure you're focusing too. Okay. As an example here, let's say that there's a river or something like that that's causing water to come from the mountains and come into the ocean. Right? Well, then the ocean evaporates. The water from the ocean evaporating turns into some rain. Oh, that rain lands in the mountains, and then that lake starts to flow back, right? All of this cycling right here, that's basically what this slide right here talks about. That's the hydrological cycle, where water is just constantly moving. It doesn't stay in one spot. Okay. So, anyways, I don't feel like I need to spend too much time on that. Here's an animation I found that's kind of cool because it actually like moves things a little bit. So let's just talk it through here. Clouds rain. Eventually, maybe it snows. Snow falls in the mountains. The mountains kind of have the water evaporate. Right? You got evaporation from not only the oceans. You got evaporation from, like, say, trees. Well, like there's snow on trees, it evaporates off. You guys okay with this concept? Can I move on? Okay, so that's the hydrosphere, anything involving water. Okay, finally the atmosphere. That's the last one we want to discuss here. So the atmosphere is anything that involves the air. Earth's atmosphere is very purposeful. It is made up of mostly nitrogen and oxygen. That's what most of our atmosphere is made out of. And we particularly care about the oxygen. Why? Because we need it to live. Yeah, we breathe in oxygen, right? In terms of the formula for that, we're going to learn about this more in biology. But we take oxygen and turn it into carbon dioxide. Which means if we're going to be talking about global warming, you know who really doesn't help global warming? Us. Yeah, nice. Because you know what we do every time we breathe? We send out carbon dioxide. And if you know even just a littlest bit about the global warming stuff, you know that carbon dioxide is what we're trying to stop. So guess what? There's now 7.5 billion people on Earth, all breathing out carbon dioxide. Does that mean that we should stop making more people? Actually, well, there's actually a lot of people, when we talk in our climate change about what would you be willing to give up, there are many people now that are taking pledges where they're saying, I'm not going to have kids because they don't want to contribute to the overpopulation of Earth. That's actually one thing that people are saying, hey, we should stop having future generations of us. Again, that's a perspective. I want to share that with you. That's not actually science, right? But that is something to consider, is like, should we stop letting people have more people? What's the ethics of that? Okay, anyways. Now, let's say that we only had humans, and humans breathed out carbon dioxide. This would be a huge problem. But fortunately, the reverse process happens. Trees take carbon dioxide and turn it back into oxygen. It's called photosynthesis. We're going to discuss that one as well. So the good news is, although there are more humans on Earth breathing out carbon dioxide, there's actually a lot of trees that soak it back in and make us more oxygen. So there is actually a nice balance between those. Okay, I got a little off topic here. I got to go back to the atmosphere now. The atmosphere, like we said, is nitrogen and oxygen. And there's a few layers to it as well. I like this picture here. Again, don't worry about memorizing, but there's the thermo, meso, strato, and troposphere. Okay. In general, we're talking about most stuff that's within the troposphere. Okay. Now, I need to give you a little bit of a physics lesson here. This is where I don't know. Hopefully this doesn't come off as me being puffing my chest out, but this is why I think you guys are lucky that I'm the physics teacher, because I want to give you a little more perspective here. Right here, close to Earth, we have a lot of gases. Gases like carbon dioxide, oxygen, and nitrogen. But as you get further and further away from the Earth, those gases are further and further apart, until the point where you get out here to the thermosphere where there is literally nothing out there. I think we may have discussed this concept before, but this is a vacuum. You guys remember talking about a vacuum where there's literally space and nothing in it? Okay, from a physics point of view now, I want to explain, well, why is there nothing out there? Does anyone hazard a guess as to why there's nothing out there? Nice try. Not a scientific explanation, though. Nice try, though. Anybody else have any idea as to why there's nothing out here? Who said that? Nicely done. Gravity. That's awesome. It's actually due to gravity. And the reason why is that gravity affects me and you, right? I'm an object. If I jump up, gravity pulls me back down. Well, nitrogen, oxygen, and carbon dioxide are also particles, right? And gravity affects them in the exact same way. Now, we know, hopefully, a little bit about space travel, right? Like, as rocket ships and stuff like that get way up into, further away from Earth, right? Gravity affects them a little bit less, right? What we know about gravity is that the further you are away from a planet, the less gravity affects. And so up here, there's less gravity up here, and so therefore there's less reason for there to be particles up here because they're getting pulled back down, right? These particles right here are constantly being pulled back down to Earth. So if I can take what you mentioned there, particles do want to escape, right? They want to spread out, but they can't because in this area right here, these particles here, they're constantly getting pulled back towards Earth. It's one of the reasons why, if any of you have ever gone in like an airplane or maybe in a car over the mountain pass, you ever have your ears kind of pop a little bit? What you're discovering is that there's less pressure. The higher up in altitude you go, the reason there's less pressure is that there's less particles. And the reason why there's less particles is that there's less gravity up there. The stronger gravity down here is actually pulling them back within the troposphere. Does that make sense? That is going to be a really important physics principle we're going to discuss later. Because we have to understand that concept. When someone says, hey, explain to me global warming, that's one thing we want to know. So, okay, anyways, let's move on here. I got lots more to cover. So long story short, here is our air, water, life, land. What I didn't really discuss is this one right here, life. The fact that in these three regions right here, there should be living things in all of them, right? So we call it the biosphere if there's something living. Sorry, I don't have my clock at the back there, so I got to keep an eye on the time now. Otherwise, I won't finish my lesson on time. The life is what really permeates all three. So, okay, can I move on? I think I need to stand in a different spot so I can see the clock now. All right. Okay, now there's another thing we want to discuss. Now that we've discussed that, okay, Earth has life, it's in three different types of locations, we can also categorize things based on what we call the climactic regions. And you're probably somewhat familiar with this, but we're going to do a little mini lesson about how we put imaginary lines on the Earth. Okay? If you've ever seen a map or seen a globe, you may know that we sometimes put lines that go like this direction or sometimes up and down direction. Those are the two most normal ways we try to categorize our map. You may know those as latitude and longitude. Ever heard those words before? If you're not familiar with those ones, longitudes are the ones that are going to go up and down. I learned them because they are the long direction, and then latitude is the sideways ones here. So the latitudinal lines are what I've got in this picture right here. Okay. And there are a few that are arbitrary. There's no actual line on the Earth in these spots here, but we've kind of arbitrarily put them there to help us keep track of major important areas. As an example, right through the middle of the Earth, you've probably heard of this one before, it's called the equator. Right? The equator is like if you could take the Earth, cut it right in half, we give it the marking of 0 degrees, right dead center in the middle. And what's most important about the equator is that it's the area on the Earth that gets the most sunlight. Here's why. Imagine here's the sun way over here. That's my sun. And the sun is shining its rays in all directions. Well, this area right here is the closest to the sun in terms of distance. Over here, this polar zone is further away, right? Like even just look at the picture I drew. If I were to measure from here to here, well, here to here is further, right? Now, this picture doesn't account for the fact that Earth is actually tipped a little bit. We're going to cover that in the future as well. Earth isn't actually straight up and down. It's actually tilted. But that's one of the most important things, is that the equator is actually the closest area to the sun. Okay. Now, we've also put some other arbitrary lines on as well. They're called the Tropic of Cancer and Tropic of Capricorn. They're about 20 degrees or so north and south of the equator, and everything inside of this zone right here we call a tropical zone. We're usually talking rainforests or deserts, but like high amounts of solar energy. We live in what's probably better described as the temperate zone, which is from here up to here. And there's an arbitrary line that we've called either the Arctic Circle or the Antarctic Circle. The Arctic Circle basically is running up through like the Yukon Northwest Territories type of area up there, right? It's at 65 degrees north. Does anybody know what our latitude is in Lethbridge? Yeah? It's around 50, yeah. Sometimes it's called the 49th parallel. The 49th parallel is where Canada and the US are divided. And so literally on these arbitrary lines is where Canada and US live. And we're a little bit north, so we're around 50 degrees north. So anyways, if you can imagine going up to about 66 and a half, we're talking like north of Edmonton up in the Northwest Territories type area there, right? Anything north of that then is polar. We would call that the Arctic or the Antarctic. And so these are like the main lines we have: Arctic Circle, Antarctic Circle, Tropics of Cancer and Capricorn, plus don't forget about the equator. Again, arbitrary lines, there's not actually anything there, but it helps us make zones or climate regions. Here's another picture that kind of helps illustrate the same thing. You've got your latitudes that go like east-west, and your longitudes that go north-south. There's a few actual longitudes that we should know. One is the prime meridian. It runs through a place called Greenwich, England. And basically they just decided that running through more or less London, that gets to be 0. I don't know, London was really important at the time they were figuring this out, right? So they get to be 0. The international date line, if you've ever heard of this before, is basically on the 180th meridian. And it's where you actually literally transfer from one day to the next. If you've ever flown across the Pacific Ocean, you'll be familiar with the idea that like you can actually land a day before you left. I don't know, anyone ever had that experience before? Anyone ever traveled that way? Yeah. So anyways, that's I'm getting a little off topic. I got to keep moving on here. The main thing I want to discuss then to finish here is what's called biomes. And biomes are what we're going to be focusing on. They're climatic and geographical regions, and what we want to focus on is their climate conditions, because different places on Earth have different climates. The climate in Lethbridge is vastly different than the climate in, say, Miami. Right? Miami is nice and hot and warm all year round. I got cousins who live down in Florida, and we went to visit them one Christmas. We left the Calgary airport when it had like 4 feet of snow, minus 30. We arrived in Florida, and it was like plus 20 outside. We were all wearing shorts and sandals. Everybody in Florida thought we were crazy for wearing shorts in the wintertime, and I was like, it's plus 20 out. Anybody ever else had this experience? And they were like, it's cold. And I'm like, it's 20 degrees out. And they're like, yeah, it's not even 30. I mean, they talk Fahrenheit as well, right? So anyways, that's my goal here, is to talk about how different places in the world have different climates, right? There are 6 main, I've got to, I'm going to come back a slide. There are 6 main, what we call biomes, where a biome is more or less just like a different region that has a different sort of, climate to it. Different weather patterns, different vegetation that grows there, different animals that habitate it. And so here are the 6, and you're probably familiar with many of them. Okay, let's talk about them for the next few minutes here. Let's start with one that you're very familiar with, rainforest. Rainforest is something like the Amazon. It's characterized by lots of trees, lots of animals, very hot, but also lots of rain. It has the most biodiversity in the entire world. You guys heard the word biodiversity before? It's how many different species you have. The Amazon rainforest, I don't know the exact quote, but the Amazon rainforest has like 70% or more of like all the species on Earth. Or like of all the different types of bugs and snakes and whatever is living, the Amazon has like most of it, honestly. Desert is very similar to the rainforest with one big difference. There's no rain. And because of that, the desert is often categorized by either sand or maybe by like dirt. But it's very hot, just like the rainforest. It's found in the same tropical sorts of places, but now there's just no water. The Sahara Desert is a good example, or the Gobi Desert are examples of deserts that, honestly, they're found in more or less the same latitudes on Earth as rainforests. They lack rain. We live in some combination of grassland and taiga. That's how you say this one here. Some people say it taiga. There's different pronunciations. I'm going to say taiga. Almost like tiger, but taiga. Okay. Grassland is characterized by, believe it or not, grass. Yeah, lots of it. Very grazing sort of territory. We live on the prairies. Prairies are more or less grassland examples, right? Where relatively flat topography, lots of herds of animals. The roots of the plants can go fairly deep. And because of that, there's a lot of different plants that grow. Because there's lots of plants that grow, we can have livestock that feed on them. So grassland is typical for herds of cows or bison or whatever it is. Unfortunately, we've killed off many of the buffalo that would have lived here, right? But does that make sense? Okay. Taiga is what most of the rest of Canada is. It's characterized by a lot of rocks and trees. That's what, oh my goodness, I can't spell it all in this thing. Rocks and trees. Where what we've got with the taiga is you still get a lot of trees, but you get what are called the conifer trees or coniferous trees. And that's a good discussion to go into the next one here, deciduous. There's 2 different main types of trees. One is the coniferous trees, one's the deciduous trees. Does anybody know the difference between the 2? Go ahead. What's the difference between conifers and deciduous? These are trees, though. Oh, trees! Give it a try. Yeah. Perfect. Yeah, and that's why we live kind of in between them, because so let's say this again here for anyone who missed that. Thank you for trying, by the way, but yeah. Okay, so deciduous is like big leaves. We're talking leaves. Can you guys stay with me? I've only got a few minutes left here. We're talking leaves that have different colors that change in the autumn. You guys know how you can go from like the green leaves to the yellow, red, orange colors? Those are deciduous ones. And we have some of those trees in this area. Conifers are what's more found in the taiga. And those are the ones that are like pine needles. And what's special about those is they don't fall off. Okay? It gets very cold in the taiga, and because of that, we need trees that are able to survive the harsh winter climates, and so they need leaves that don't shed. But deciduous trees are the ones that fall off every fall and then have to regrow in the spring. Okay? Deciduous is often found in Japan or on the east coast of Canada and the United States. Now, that doesn't mean that we don't have some of that here, but they have like almost entirely that over there. Okay. Finally, tundra. Tundra is basically your Arctic, and what really separates the tundra from the taiga is that this is so cold that the ground is always frozen. Okay? Frozen ground. We call it permafrost. Is what really separates the tundra. It makes it very hard for things to grow. Are there plants that can grow in the tundra? Yep, but they have extremely short roots because they can't go very far down, right? There's not a lot of water in the ground that's in a liquid state, so the plants have a hard time getting water to live. There's not a lot of sunlight, and so the tundra is usually the extreme north and extreme south. Okay, so those are the main biomes, but to be perfectly honest, that's not it. Like, although I've given you some, here's another slide that I found here that kind of walks through like more. Like there's the Mediterranean biome, there's the semi-arid biome. Like if you want to, you can kind of like categorize things even smaller. I found some other pictures that kind of illustrate this. Here's one map that more or less just covers the main 6 biomes. So you notice that like rainforests are right here, right, dark green. This right here looks like some grassland. See how there's some grassland encroaching up here into the prairies in Alberta? Right. Blue right here is your taiga. Most of that's Russia and Canada. Far north is your tundra. Right. Over here is that deciduous forest, eastern Canada. You get a lot of that over here in Europe as well as Japan. But we could take the exact same map. Oh, this is one that talks about rainforest. Let's skip through that. Here's the exact same map of the Earth, but now we've broken up into like way more different things. We've got like, I don't even know how to say some of these. Monsoon forest, tree savanna, dry steppe, semi-desert, grass. Like we can break it up into more categories. We're just going to keep it very simple and have 6 categories. Okay, I skipped a slide. I should really go back to it. This one right here. We haven't talked biology yet, which is kind of unfortunate because I have to kind of either choose to do bio first or do earth science first. I chose to do earth science first. But we're going to come back to this at the appropriate time. There's a lot of similarities actually between a cell in biology and between a biome. For one, they're both living, right? We're talking living things, biology. We've got things that are actually actively alive and moving. It wouldn't be appropriate to compare a biome to, like, say, an atom, because atoms aren't alive. But both of these are living systems. What is also unique about them is that things come in and out. For example, matter can cycle in and out of a biome, and so can energy. Sunlight comes in and leaves. A caribou can walk in and walk back out again. Cells are actually very similar. Energy has to come in and leave, and matter comes in and out of our cells in a similar way. We'll discuss this at the appropriate time. I just wanted to point out that there's a lot of similarities between biomes and cells. All right, we're almost done, I promise. Okay, the last couple things we want to discuss then are just a quick recap of our biomes then. Really, the 2 things that help define a biome, if you can see this word right here is temperature, and this word right down here is precipitation, meaning rain. If you have a lot of temperature but no rain, you're probably a desert. If you're hot and you have rain, you're probably a rainforest. Whereas if you're cold with no rain, you're probably tundra. If you're kind of in between, you kind of see how this map kind of works here? Kind of talks about the 2 factors, heat and temperature, and how much rain precipitation you get. Okay. So last thought, what is Canada? Okay. Here's that picture of Canada now. Hopefully you can see this. We just barely kind of fall into the territory, which would be grassland. We're part of the prairies. But to be honest, we're more or less right on the boundary of the taiga as well. Most of Canada is that rocks and trees, the pine trees, sorts of things there, right? Not necessarily a lot of seasonal change, like compared to, say, the deciduous forest. Deciduous forest, you can literally see the leaves go from red to yellow to, the orange color there. We had one snowfall, the leaves turned yellow and they all fell off, right? So we don't quite have as much of that deciduous forest there. So. Okay, here's a maybe more detailed picture of all of North America, but again, this is one of those ones that then breaks it down by northern forests and marine west coast forests and semi-arid highlands. If you want to get more specific, you can. We're not going to, though. Okay, I think I'm done. I think that was my last slide. It was. Okay, questions? More or less stuff you kind of knew? Okay, I wanted to make sure we gave you the right vocabulary, though. I need you to know about the different types of biomes, and I need you to know about the different places on Earth. Okay, here's our last thing. This is kind of your homework assignment. Yeah, I know, I'm breaking out the H word. Homework. Okay, do you guys have your phones out? You guys want to head to Moodle, please? All right, so I'm going to do something new in this unit here. We're going to do a reflection at the end of every lesson, just like we've been doing in the past. However, I'm going to change a little bit about how it looks. I hope this will be valuable. Just have to get my phone logged in, so bear with me. There we go. Yeah, it's a little bit of a shorter unit. Okay. So, head to Moodle. Okay, so here's what I want you guys to do for all of the tasks we do in this new unit here. Okay. There's going to be a lesson on biomes. If you click on the lesson on biomes, which maybe you haven't been doing in the past, I usually try to leave a YouTube video here that you can watch. If you start the lesson, you'll actually notice that I actually don't have a YouTube video yet because I've changed my notes up and I don't have a previous one I could put in there. But what I'm recording right now will get put in here at some point. However, I'm going to add one more thing. After you're done, can you guys hopefully see there's going to be a little progress bar along the bottom? I'm going to give you 5 follow-up questions to our lesson based on stuff we talked about that I want you to try to answer. We'll do one together as a group. Just click on practice questions. Okay. Which biome is characterized by low biodiversity and plants with very short roots? I'm just kind of like giving you some like follow-up questions. Okay. Now, hopefully you all have the same question as me. Are the answers in different orders though? Yeah, okay. So let's talk this through as a group. What biome has low biodiversity and really short roots? Yeah, let's talk it through. Rainforest? There's lots in the rainforest, right? Deciduous forest. How about tundra, right? Did I talk about tundra? Why does tundra have really short roots? Frozen ground, yeah. Okay, so select tundra and submit. Here's what would happen then. It should then tell you either you're correct or you're incorrect. If you're correct, you get to move on. Okay. Let me do another question here. I'm going to pick a wrong answer just on purpose. It says, which biome is characterized by a layer of permafrost? Hey, we just talked about that. That should be tundra. But let's say that you weren't paying attention for the last hour and you have no idea what the answer is and you accidentally picked desert. Here's what would happen. You click submit. It would say incorrect. You have 4 attempts remaining. Okay. There's only 4 choices. I'm going to give you 5 attempts at this. You should be able to get the right answer eventually. Does that make sense? So it's set up so that you get 5 attempts. You got it wrong. It'll say, would you like to try again? You'd say, yes, I'd like to try again. Let's say you still get it wrong. This time you pick taiga. Submit. 3 more attempts. And I might give you a little clue here. I might say, which location on Earth has continuous frozen ground or soil? Yes, I'd like to try again. Long story short is you don't get to move on until you get it right. You don't have a lot of choices. Just select a different answer, right? Okay. The goal of this, by the way, is not just to like have you click all of them until you get through the task, but I want to be a little bit of a summary of the lesson. I think this would be helpful. Okay. One more thing. When you're done that, then we're still going to do a normal reflection. So here's your reflection. I want you to try sometime over the weekend, please. Here are the questions. There are 3 main things that we learned this lesson here. Not a whole lot. I want you to share with me back again. What do you understand about the different components of the biosphere? What do or don't you understand about different ways that we categorize our geographic locations on Earth? And what do you understand about the main biomes found on Earth? Okay, those are the 3 main things we talked about in today's lesson. What's in the biosphere? How do we organize the Earth with those arbitrary lines that we put on them to try to like keep track of where things are? And what are the main biomes and what are they like? Okay, so anyways, that's your task. This one's going to be a little bit different, however. In the past, if you haven't given me a sufficient response, I've made you do it again. I've set this one up a little bit differently. This one is literally just you do it, you get credit. There will be no going back and needing to do it again. That being said, though, I can still see your responses. So if you're just going to write in gibberish just to get it over with, I'm going to know that, okay? But just so you're aware, this won't be a task where it's like, do it again, do it again, do it again. We're just going to do it once. So please just give me your best honest effort, okay? All right, that's it. That's all I got. So sometime over the weekend or right now while you got your phones out, 5 multiple choice questions. You're probably already done those, aren't you, some of you? Okay, and then start the reflection. Cool. All right, thanks everybody.